Hey clowns, welcome to Crimelia Street. I'm Sam,
And I'm Tori.
and we are once again gathered here today.
So this is Alto, Texas. Keyes shares this story with investigators because he knew that they would catch on because the dyed money in the rental car from the bank robbery. And at this point, he was being like super bold and he didn't even take his battery out of his phone. He admits to burning a house down in Texas. Keyes, the rest of like the FBI interrogations is pretty much Keyes just like baiting them. He does end up giving them like a little bit more solid information, but nothing that ever leads to confirming his role in any more murders. But we do get some more information about like where some bodies may be. But for the most part, he's just like baiting them and it's really fucking annoying. So he tells them of a house that he burned down in Texas, and he says that he did it to distract police in the area while he went and did this bank robbery. They ask him like if he took anyone during this time, and he insists that he didn't. He also mentions something about like looking for churches to burn down, and they ask him why, and he says for personal reasons, and goes on to say something about he was thinking maybe he can keep his hostages there longer because in small towns no one is in a church, I guess, during the week. And then he also says or maybe just burn it with them inside. It definitely seems like he's got some weird things with churches, which is again probably from his upbringing. He also never mentions his father and never wants to talk about his father, and it is suspected that he and maybe some of his sisters or siblings were abused by his father. I believe there's 10 of them, the siblings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Again, cults.
Yeah.
None of those births were in a hospital, by the way.
My gosh. Okay. I mean,
Yeah. Heidi's a trooper, kind of.
right. I could never. I'm sorry.
No.
No, I need all the interventions, all of the doctors, everything.
I tell you.
Please.
The epidural was a godsend for, like, the 15 minutes of actual pushing was the easiest part of my labor.
There you go.
Yeah, I kept looking at her. I'm like, I don't feel anything.
This is amazing.
Yeah, she's like, I think the epidural's finally working, right? I was
my gosh.
a little loopy, I think, too.
Yeah, same. It was like, well, after like however, 9+ months of being like, no vices, it's nice to get a little
No
relief.
Yes, yeah. And in that moment, for sure.
Yeah.
So investigators were having trouble figuring out what other crimes he may have been involved in or a part of because the way he traveled and how random his crimes were. And he would dispose of evidence across state lines as well, making it difficult for local agencies, even if they had like a missing person, like they're not going to find anything because the FBI isn't involved because they don't know that anything is cross state, so like because of their jurisdiction, there's only so far they can go without a decent lead, why to cross state lines, and they didn't have that.
Right.
So it's just crazy. And the information on his computer, that tower computer that he said was Kimberly's, there were 44 people that were matched to missing persons on the National Missing and Unidentified website. 11 of which were teenagers, 10 were small children, the youngest each 1 year old.
No.
They doubted Keyes, and he said that he wouldn't harm children. And they thought even if he stopped harming children after he had his daughter, which may have been like kind of when he set that code for himself, what about before that?
Right. Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. And I think that's where that extra 36, so let's see, it was 11 people that he they're thinking 11 that he's like said that he has actually murdered. So what is 44 minus 11? That's 33. So maybe like 3 more popped up in there somewhere, but that's pretty close to 36.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who disappeared during the timeline of Keyes' travels had to be considered. He has 9 siblings, which I mentioned a minute ago, and he asked the officers to leave all of them alone. For his mother, he said if she wanted to continue to talk, let her talk, and he didn't ask them to leave her alone, which is interesting. They found no DNA in the shed that Samantha was murdered, assaulted, and dismembered in, or in the truck that she was abducted in. So he was extremely thorough at cleaning those areas out. FBI profilers said Keyes was a concern and they had no precedent on how to profile him because they had never experienced something like him before. He had no victim type, no set disposal site for victim remains, thousands of miles between him and victims in a very short time period, and he had those caches all over the country, possibly all over the world, and he used travel to cover up his crimes. They did realize that dark spots in his cell history when the battery was removed would be a tell for when he was doing something bad. He called Ted Bundy his hero and said that he could relate to Ted because he could lead a double life well, like Ted could as well, which is disgusting.
Yeah.
Another favorite of his was H.H. Holmes, who had like a murder castle or like
that name sounds
mansion.
So familiar.
Yeah, same. I don't know much about him actually.
Huh.
But he's one of like the big like famous serial killers, so I'm kind of surprised that I don't. Ooh, Siri just came on.
Is she looking him up?
And I'm over here talking about serial killers. Okay.
Oh.
So, is she looking him up? He said that he had plans when he wanted to retire to follow in H.H. Holmes' footsteps and wanted to create a dungeon where he can hold his victims for longer and torture them, pretty much. His parents were initially Mormon, then they ended up joining this religious group called the Ark, which was super racist and anti-Semitic. They wanted to raise their children in nature. They had their first 2 children in Utah. Then his family moved to Washington. This is where they joined the Ark church group. They did not have heat or plumbing for years, which is wild in Washington state. That is illegal now. I know for sure you have to have 2 forms of heat. And it was probably illegal then, because this is only, this was before Israel Keys, so it was like the early 70s probably. Okay, sorry. So they didn't have heat or plumbing for years. His dad was building them a house. The children farmed and were forced to remember scripture. Israel was the man of the house in Jeff's absence. I think when he was working, Jeff was the dad. Israel's toes were disfigured because his shoes were so small when he was a kid, because all they wore was hand-me-downs. His siblings loved him. There would be another kid every 2 years, pretty much, and 10-child schedule.
Ugh.
The house got so crowded some of the time the kids would camp outside during the warmer months, so they would pretty much just be camping outside April to September.
Wow.
Parents quit Mormonism after leaving Utah and joined a church that pushed white supremacy. As a child, Keys would shoot people's houses with BB guns with his sister. If no one came out, they'd break in and steal things or just move them around and wait in the bushes to see people come home and get angry. This goes into some of Keys's childhood, and some of this stuff is graphic with animal cruelty, just to put trigger warning out there.
So that's 2 of the 3 at least, with setting fires and animal cruelty.
Yes. I don't think bedwetting was a thing for him, as far as we know, at least. We're only getting this from his account, though, so who knows?
Right.
He shot a dog in the woods one time with one of his friends, and his friend couldn't handle it, and so he said he never did stuff with that friend again. His sister had a cat that would get into the trash can, and he took cord and tied it around the cat's neck and tied the cord to a tree. He then shot the cat in the stomach, and the cat started running around the tree, vomiting. He said he was not affected by this at all, but his sister and some of her friends followed them out, and there's another kid there who was about his age who was vomiting, which is
that's so
the
sad.
Appropriate reaction.
Yeah.
He said he just thought it was funny the way the cat was running.
That's crazy.
It's, yeah, crazy, so cruel. I can't. And for someone who, like, developed empathy later, like, for children, potentially, I don't know, you'd think that maybe for animals you'd have some empathy too, but apparently not.
Right.
When he was 15 years old, he began building a cabin about a mile from his parents' house. He was working in construction at this point, so he knew how to build things. Jeff, his dad, had finished the house for the family to live in at this point, and Keyes' mom didn't want him to move out, but Keyes wanted to be alone. He hunted anything with a heartbeat, he said, but mainly deer, and he would give it to his family to eat. We are full of distractions tonight. He was arrested for shoplifting, and when Heidi, the mom, and Jeff, the dad, found all of the guns he had stolen in his cabin that he had built, they forced him to move back home and chop wood to pay back the victims of the people he had stolen from. Israel at this point had a girlfriend. He was 18 years old, and when his parents found out, he was forbidden from seeing her because that's unholy to have a girlfriend, I guess, and he could only write to her. Israel felt shame for having any, like, feelings of sexuality towards this girl because of his upbringing. 2 of his sisters were also rebellious, so eventually they left Washington and moved to Oregon. Then in 1997, they moved to upstate New York, then Smyrna, Maine, to make honey and live with the Amish. Israel finally at this point was like, I'm done doing this, like, cult hopping shit, and I'm not going with you. He didn't want to join the Amish. He missed his girlfriend back in Washington. He stayed at the house in New York that they had instead of going to live with the Amish, and it was a tiny farmhouse on 10 acres near the Canadian border. He got his GED and then joined the Army without a birth certificate or social security number. He talked his way into it because, again, they didn't birth in hospitals, so there was no record of these kids.
Wow.
Which is so tough for the kids because then they're almost forced to stay in this, like, church environment off the grid and stuff because what else are they going to do?
Oh my gosh.
He never saw combat in the Army. He did well with the structure because he had never had it as a kid, but he struggled at being social because everything he'd missed out on growing up. Like, they would, talk about Michael Jackson or something, and he didn't know, like, who these big pop stars were and stuff. Mm-hmm. But he was a good soldier. He tried LSD and coke in the Army and had a coke addiction for a short amount of time, then stopped cold turkey because coke made him feel out of control. Alcohol was another addiction of his that suited him better. He got a DUI while in the Army, which I think is interesting because they keep saying how, like, nothing ever happened, like, he has no criminal record, but I would...
Right.
So I don't really have a conclusion to that, but I did find that interesting. I don't know, maybe it got expunged at some point, and this was part of the military records. I'm not sure. Or I think military, if it happens, like, on base, too, I think that there's, like, a different procedure, like, within the like, you go to a military court.
Yeah, because they have, like, military police and all that, so...
Right. So maybe that's why it wasn't coming up, like, when they're doing background checks and stuff. I don't know. But he made sure not to drink too much around his family because he was worried that he let something slip about what he had done, he mentions. And this is when he's in the Army and still pretty young.
Oh, wow.
So that's interesting. Like, we don't know if he's talking about harming people. We do learn about, the animal cruelty stuff. We do learn about another incident of when he was young, which I think was before this. But yeah, just interesting if is he talking about that stuff or is he talking about something more?
Yeah.
Israel got engaged to the woman in Colville, Washington, which is the one who he was missing, and the one who his parents, like, made him break up with, and they were only able to write. They had never had sex and had only kissed when he proposed to her. That was their first kiss. She wanted to wait until marriage, and he said that he did too, though he did not actually want to wait till marriage. He just said that to her. He had gotten a prostitute and was actively searching for women to have sex with. Keyes said he always knew he was bisexual from a very young age. While he was in the military, he met Tammy and they bonded over childhood trauma. Tammy was Black and mixed with Native American. He never shared with her his white supremacist past. They were inseparable for a while. Tammy ended up pregnant. He told her she should get an abortion. The woman in Colville knew something was up. He told her that she didn't know who he was and that he had slept with another woman and no longer believed in God and didn't want to be with her anymore. He changed his mind about the abortion and thought Tammy was his best shot at a normal life. He liked kids, he said. He left the fiancé and went back to Tammy. Keyes was honorably discharged from the Army. Again, no details on that, but it is around the time that Tammy's pregnant, so maybe it's something to do with that. He made sure her son from another relationship was included in the family dynamic. Tammy began realizing that Keyes needed control over everything, and he was like, at first she liked that he incessantly like cleaned things, and then she realized it was because he like needed control over those things. He would not be in control sometimes at night when he'd drink a lot, and he'd tell her he's a bad person sometimes when he was really drunk. 2 weeks after Israel's daughter was born, his father passed away. He was on a train as the family was relocating again and became ill, and the illness got bad rapidly while they were on the train. The train staff ended up saying they needed to get off the train so that he could seek medical attention, and they were pretty much kicked off the train. It's unclear if they ever did seek medical attention, but it's thought that they probably did not. Investigators have reason to believe Israel and some of their other siblings may have been abused by their father. They wondered if he could have had anything to do with his father's death, but there was no signature of Israel anywhere near his father at this time.
It's also interesting that Tammy saying that, like, when he would get drunk, he would talk about, like, how he's a bad person and he was afraid of telling it, like, being drunk around his family. Like, yeah. Obviously alcohol affects everyone differently, but, like, for some people, it's like maybe they would do things that they normally wouldn't do, and for other people, it makes, like, different part of your, like, subconscious and stuff come out. So it's like, I don't know. And that's crazy.
Yeah, and it seems like he was mostly worried about people he was, like, close with as well. Like, he was just worried that I think if he's drinking with his army buddies, he's not worried that he's going to open up too much, but, like, with his family and with Tammy. Right.
Yeah.
He was more worried with them. So, yeah, that is interesting. And also, the timeline, like, this is very young Israel, and he's saying these things about him being such a bad person. Like, to what extent had things happened at this point?
Right.
Tammy and Israel's baby developed a serious respiratory illness when she was 8 months old, and Keyes and Tammy argued over how to treat it. Tammy had suffered severe stomach pain since birth and was diagnosed with uterine cancer and was forced to have a hysterectomy. Post-surgery, Tammy was given pain medications, and from then on, she became increasingly reliant on them. Keyes was pretty much a single father at this point. Tammy was still, like, together with him, but she was pretty absent. By 2003, Tammy was worsening, and he took their daughter to a nearby house on the reservation to protect his daughter from Tammy, so he moved out and moved into a nearby house. He dated 3 women before meeting Kimberly Anderson who was a travel nurse living in Fort Angeles on a dating website in 2005. Tammy wanted Keyes back, and the more her life fell apart, the more she relied on the pain medication. She ended up crashing her car while driving on the pain meds and was sentenced to 25 days in jail and 2 months of inpatient rehab. Keyes allowed Tammy to believe they still might work it out, and they began sleeping together again. Keyes wanted to move to Anchorage with Kimberly as she got a job offer there, and Tammy said that he can't take their child. Keyes told her she'd have to get sober if she wanted to fight him for custody, and she did and started functioning better. Once Tammy was doing better, he said he'd leave and she could have custody of their child, and he'd go to Anchorage with Kimberly, and he moved to Alaska March 9th that year. I don't know at what point he does actually get custody of the child, because the child does live with him by the time all this stuff happens with Samantha Koenig, and I'm not sure what caused that, if she relapsed or what. Tammy was really upset, though, because she was hoping that he would, like, stay, too, once she got clean. He didn't go directly to Alaska. He traveled up and down the West Coast for 3 months, and even into Mexico before landing in Anchorage. He said nothing to the FBI about this time frame, but it's suspected, obviously, that, you know, things may have happened during that time. So going back to his childhood a bit, Julie Harris went missing in 1996 from Colville, Washington, which is where he lived with his family when they were in the white supremacist group. She was 12 years old when she went missing, and she was a double amputee that wore prosthetic feet. She was the most famous person in Colville because she had won a medal in the Special Olympics for downhill skiing. She left for school one day and was never seen again. She'd been last seen with a man in a trench coat, and Keyes was 18 years old at this point and about 6 foot tall, so he would have appeared as a man. Her prosthetic feet were found on the banks of the Colville River. In 1997, the rest of her remains were found by children playing in the woods 3 miles from Colville. So it's suspected that maybe he was a part of that, and maybe she was his first victim. And being disabled too, she would have been an easy, you know, seemed like easy prey.
Yeah, that's awful.
It's so awful. And a child too, might I add.
Yeah.
Against the code. Cassie Emerson was also 12 years old when she went missing. She lived with her mom and was reported missing after their trailer had been destroyed by arson.
Damn.
Or with her mother inside. Cassie's remains were found the following April, 13 minutes from Colville. Keyes later mentioned that the first thing he ever burnt down was a trailer.
Okay.
So that's suspicious. So that's 2 that he's suspected in, but it's never been able to be proven. Keyes left Oregon in 1997, and the kidnapping of little girls stopped after that. He never admitted to killing either of these girls or being a part of their disappearance. Keyes mentioned at one point to the investigators that he considered taking people in Anchorage a few times and that he had some caches hidden out there. He decided against it and said he'd go back to his old stomping grounds in the East, which is another key for investigators, like old stomping grounds.
Right.
Keyes didn't want to give any more info until he was shown the pictures of the couriers. So this whole time he knows that the FBI is looking for the couriers. And at this point they're searching the landfills because they know that the house was demolished and all the bits were brought to the landfills. Spoiler alert, they never find them and they have to call the search off. So the bodies never were recovered. So that's another bit of information he didn't need to tell them that he thought that they would figure out anyways, and that's why he shared that information with them. Which just goes, right, it just goes to show even when he's telling them where people are and what he did, like, they still can't get enough evidence on him. So finding the other people that he never mentioned, it's nearly impossible.
Oh, man.
Right. At this point, he said that he wasn't going to give out any other victims without his execution date, which he still had not received. And the investigators told him that there's no way that they can get it within a year because of the due process of capital punishment. The search for the couriers continued. Bell tried to convince Keyes that they wouldn't be able to keep other jurisdictions from going to the media if he didn't give them more information. He did tell them that he robbed a bank in Upper Lake, New York in April 21st, 2009. Keyes said he had gone to Vermont to dig up some guns, a cache that he had buried there. Deborah Feldman is another suspected victim of his from Hackensack, New Jersey, who went missing April 8th, 2009. He initially denied having anything to do with her disappearance, but a few weeks later they pressed him again and he said he did kidnap her, but he said he didn't want to talk about it. again. He's admitted there was one body that had been found and it was ruled an accident, but he had actually been the one to murder that person. He's also said there was one body in New York and that there was a lot of news about it. And he was asked if the remains of that body would be recoverable, and he said some of them should be. There was a lot of like weird medical things that he did that he also didn't tell his family about. So like those dates and times are like suspect of possible attacks of his as well. For instance, he went to Mexico to get a gastric band surgery at one point, and he was always like a lean, fit guy. So it's not really clear why he would do that, and then also why he would go to Mexico for it, and then why he wouldn't tell any of his family about it either. So the whole thing is very strange. There's also a lot of dental work that was done, I believe, in Mexico as well. And then he also, just like in California, had medical work done and stuff that, again, he wasn't sharing with people and just didn't seem to line up.
Who knows what he was doing in Mexico while he was there.
Exactly. Yep.
Ugh.
Something tells me he wasn't up to good things.
Right.
Investigators couldn't get much info from the army about Keyes while he was enlisted. They asked some of the people that he served with. They interviewed them. One night, some of the soldiers had rented a hotel. They had gotten a prostitute. They'd all been drinking, and when the woman got there, she went into a room with Keyes. After some amount of time, she came flying out of the room, and Keyes was chasing after her, trying to give her money, but she wouldn't take it. And she was trying to get out of the room. He blocked her from the door, and she kicked him hard enough to get away. And this is, like, with an audience, too, so
wow.
Something tells me he's probably, like if it was just the two of them, I don't know if she would have been able to get away. When the other soldiers asked what he'd done to freak her out so much, he said nothing. He later told investigators that he'd thrown her around a little bit. He wasn't going to let her run the show. So, again, back to the control thing.
Oh my gosh.
He said there'd been another girl, a Norwegian exchange student who was very young, who he'd met in Tel Aviv. He knew where her dorm was because she had told him, and he went to see her. He said, and I quote, "I wouldn't say that was an outright rape because we were hanging out and stuff." End quote.
Oh my God.
He said he did lose control a little bit as things progressed, and that's when he realized if he was going to do that kind of stuff, it had to be complete strangers, and it couldn't be while he was in the army. When he got out, he said it didn't take long. When he got out of the army, he said it didn't take long. Most of his platoon ended up keeping their distance after a certain amount of time as they realized he was not a good dude, except for one guy named Perkins. Keyes told Perkins about wanting to rob a bunch of banks and kidnap people and hold them for ransom on a mass scale. Perkins did not think he was kidding. Keyes mentioned he could never give anyone back, and Perkins assumed he'd meant he'd have to kill them. When they asked him if he was surprised Keyes had been arrested for murder, he said he was surprised he'd been caught.
Oof, that's creepy.
Yeah. And also, what the fuck, Perkins? Like, why are you hanging out with this guy? He was
Right.
also, when they were a part of that Ark church, their neighbors were, what was their names? Oh, Kehoe. But yeah, they're neighbors, and they were like the kids were best friends with these people growing up, were the Kehoes, and they bombed the Bath Consolidated School in Bath, Michigan.
Huh.
Oh my God. So this was like their dad who did the bombing. So they were friends with the kids of the dad who did this bombing. And it was known as the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in the United States at the time.
Oh, wow.
And I guess I didn't realize. I thought that happened later, but I guess that had happened before. So they must have known that those people had done that when they were letting their children hang out with those people.
Yikes.
Because that happened in 1927.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, ooh.
Okay, so Wednesday, May 23rd, 2012, Keyes attempted to escape a courtroom surrounded by 8 armed guards, and 6 U.S. Marshals were in the back of the courtroom as well. It took a taser to bring him down. He used stored up, whittled down pencil pieces as a lockpick to take off his restraints, and used cellophane from his lunch wrappers to make it look like his handcuffs were tied together.
What?
Yes.
Okay.
And this was so frustrating too because Payne the entire time, so he was being held at Anchorage Correctional something, ACC is the acronym, and Payne the whole time was telling them like this guy is so smart, like you guys have to make sure he's on suicide watch, and like you can't be giving him pencils, you can't give him shoes with laces, you can't give him razors to shave himself.
He
And
will
I
find a
guess
way.
yes. And they just weren't listening to him, and like the guy, what do you call it? The warden, I think it was, just kept telling Keys, he's like, I put a note on the door, like if my guards don't listen, I don't know what to tell, like I can't do anything else.
Oh my gosh.
It's just so irresponsible.
Yeah.
Keys did end up confessing to 4 bodies in Washington state. He said the first 2 he murdered sometime between July 2001 and 2005, and their remains were together. The other 2 he took and murdered separately sometime in the fall or summer of 2005, maybe 2006. These gaps that he's giving seem intentional because, again, he was so meticulous. He remembered where these caches are buried all over the country. It seems strange that he wouldn't know the detail. I think he's trying to send them on a wild goose chase. I don't think anyone thinks he was lying, but I think they think he's teasing them.
Yeah.
He said he used a boat to dispose of 1 body, maybe 2, in Lake Crescent. So that's another lake that you would remember, 1 or 2.
Right. Don't be cute. Come on.
Right. This is not demure.
Stop. No.
Yes. Lake Crescent was one of the deepest lakes in Washington. He said he took 1 male and female pair and another female pair, but wouldn't ever uncover their relationship to one another. He never said much more about these bodies. So we know there's 4 in Washington. Don't know who they are or very specific time frames. He mentioned he went through New York and Washington a lot. His cell phone records indicated he was close to a double murder in Washington in July 11th, 2006, in the Snoqualmie National Forest. It was a mother and daughter. Oh, there were 4 people hiking on this trail. A mother and daughter, and then a husband and wife. The husband and wife the trail forked at one point. The husband and wife went right towards Bear Lake, and the mother and daughter went left towards Pinnacle Lake. Sometime after, the wife had heard a thunder-like noise off in the distance, but the sky was blue and clear. The couple just continued on their journey. They picnicked. The couple encountered the mother and daughter again as they were leaving the trail. They looked like they were squatting or knelt down, but their bodies had been posed along the side of the trail. The couple ran back down the trail. The 2 who had been shot was Mary Cooper, 56 years old, and her daughter Susanna Stoughton, 27 years old. They were both shot in the head by a .22, and the wounds were not initially visible to first responders. This made national headlines, one of the rarest crimes. It was unclear if the shooter was close range or sniper. And again, they couldn't get much information about his military time, but they suspect he may have been a sniper in the military as well. No leads ever emerged from that. Key's phone had pinged in that area starting at 3:43 a.m. and ending at 5:43 p.m. Fort Angeles, where Key spent a lot of time, was about 3 hours from the trailhead. Between the hours of 1:48 and 4:44 p.m., his battery had been removed because the cell data had gone dark. So it seems likely that he was involved in that as well. Okay, that's all we have for this part. Tune in 2 weeks for the next part. Bye, clowns.